A very good day to everyone. This is Daniele Cattedu. I am the Chief Technology Officer at the Cloud Security Alliance. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you today. And I'm in a great company. I'm with Emily Beam, Senior Vice President at Cyber Risk Institute. Emily, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. I'm pleased to be here today. My name is Emily Beeman, SVP at the Cyber Risk Institute. We're a nonprofit coalition of financial institutions looking to harmonize cyber regulation. So excited to talk a bit about our collaboration with the Cloud Security Alliance.
Thank you so much, Emily. So today, Emily and I are going to discuss about cloud control metrics for financial services. And as you will see from the agenda, we are going to go through three main topics, and I'm going to give you initially an introduction to the Cloud Control Matrix version 4. Emily then is going to entertain you with a deep dive into the Cloud Profile, which is the result of a collaboration between the CRI, so the Cyber Risk Institute, and the Cloud Security Alliance. And then finally, I will give you a preview of what's cooking on the CSA side, especially I'm going to talk about the CCM financial service addendum. Without any further ado, I'm going to jump into the topic of today, which is, first part, as I said, the cloud control matrix. So I'm going to hope that many of our audience and many of the attendees has already a good understanding of the cloud control matrix. But for those of you that don't, the cloud control matrix is a de facto standard for cloud security. It has been created by the Cloud Security Alliance about 10 years ago. And over the past 10 years, we have been really supporting cloud service providers, customers, the auditing and assurance community, and those organizations that creates GRC programs or builds tool for GRC into improving their approach to cloud security. One of the key of the success of the cloud control matrix, I would say, is the fact that we are talking about a community-driven piece of research. Pretty much as we do always in CSA, the cloud control matrix is the result of the collaboration of literally thousands of volunteers over the course of the last 10 years. These volunteers coming from representing different stakeholders, so cloud service providers, customers, and the assurance community that have grouped together and helped the Cloud Security Alliance in creating the cloud control matrix. By now, CCM has become a sort of lingua franca between cloud actors. And that has been really one of the main drivers for the Cloud Security Alliance to create it. So not only is a best practice that we want to offer to the community in order for the various actors within the cloud community to improve their security posture and to facilitate their approach to cloud and the risk management in the cloud, but also it's a good way for cloud service providers and cloud customers to communicate between themselves. So often we know that there is a sort of communication break within the various parties. Not everyone is able to express or is expressing requirements and needs with the same vocabulary, using the same jargon. And essentially, this is what CCM is doing. So it's simplifying that communication, providing a standard language that can be used in order to express requirements and control in the cloud space. That is why also CCM is often used to simplify the approach to cloud security implementation, to assessment, and of course, ultimately to compliance. One of the key additions that we have had with the launch, or with the release, better said, of the CCM version 4 has been the introduction of the Security Shared Responsibility Model, SSRM in short. The idea behind the introduction of the SSRM is pretty straightforward. CCM has always included an attribution of responsibility of each one of the controls that it includes between customer and provider, but it was very much high level. With the introduction of version 4, 2 years ago now, we wanted to better detail in a more granular way the attribution of responsibilities between the two main parties in the cloud relationship, and that was what SSRM does. Other essential feature of the cloud control matrix is the fact that it's aligned and is mapped to a number of different global regulation and information security standards. The reason why we did it again is pretty obvious. When CCM was created, there were already in the market a number of different existing information security framework. ISO 27001, NIST 853, SOC 2, or better said, the Trust and Service Principle, and many other standards. So we didn't want to reinvent the wheel really, but we wanted to provide a framework that it was really applicable and relevant to cloud. And then we wanted to create that connection between the CCM, so each control of the CCM and controls existing in these other standards, in order to give to any user of the cloud control matrix a clear understanding on how a certain control that is relevant to cloud computing, it was linked back to other controls that those companies were possibly already implementing, but they were just relevant in a non-cloud environment. One of the byproduct of this mapping with a number of different regulation standards has also been the fact that CSA has started a very strong collaboration with a number of governments, regulation, and national agencies. And just to give you a couple of examples, the STAR program, of which the CCM is really the backbone, has been recently implemented as a mandating assurance program, for instance, in the Italian public administration. As of yesterday, so the 19th of January, so we are recording this presentation on the 20th, the Italian National Security Agency is officially in charge for the accreditation of cloud services in the for Italian public administration, and they have explicitly selected the STAR program and CCM as the set of the leading requirements. So this is to say that we are not just supporting the private sector market, but also we are very close to the collaboration with governmental institutions, and then to some vertical sectors, as we will see in the course of this presentation. Moving quickly forward, the structure of CCM is pretty straightforward. It's composed of 17 security domains, and it includes 197 controls. Each one of the controls has a control applicability and ownership, as I referred earlier to the idea of the shared responsibility model. He has an indication of the architectural relevance of that specific control within the cloud stack, and it provides also an understanding of how a specific control is relevant from the organizational perspective. So which is the unit within the organization to which that specific control is relevant to. CCM is not just a set of controls. CCM is a best practice that include a number of different components. The controls clearly, but then the questionnaire, the consensus assessment initiative questionnaire that is used in order to provide to both users and especially to assessors a way to verify that a certain CCM control is in place. Then we got guidelines for implementation, for auditing. We are currently working on extended guidelines for the shared responsibility model. We have been working since 1.5 years to the creation of metrics As we all know, metrics are key in our sector. The idea that we can precisely measure the way in which a control has been implemented is something that is kind of one of the foundational pieces on any GRC program. Any organization that wants to govern properly its security program has to have a good means for measuring what's going on. And we are generating these metrics in order to be able for companies to have a better understanding of the quality and level of implementation of controls. And then finally, we are working on addendum for sector specific and for country specific. And again, I'm gonna get there in a second. Now, with that said, with this overview on the cloud control metrics, I would like to pass the mic to Emily. As I mentioned earlier, CSA and CRI have been working for the past year and a half into a collaboration to provide a better solution for the financial sector. And the cloud profile is really, the result of this collaboration. Emily.
Thanks, Daniele. Go on to the next slide. So I'll spend a couple of minutes just talking about what the profile is if you're not familiar, and then kind of get into the cloud profile and our collaboration. About a decade, over the last decade or so, regulators from around the world have obviously begun to issue more and more regulations and supervisory guidelines related to cyber, and that has made it increasingly difficult for institutions to manage. As a result, a group of financial institutions came together under the United States Financial Services Sector Coordinating Council to discuss the potential for developing a framework. This was a little after the National Institute for Standards and Technology issued the cybersecurity framework, and CPMI IOSCO issued its guidelines. And so the foundations for a framework were there. It just needed to be extended, customized, and brought down to a level that was usable for a given institution. So over the course of about 100 different working sessions from about 300 different experts and from financial institutions and trade associations, the profile was developed. These working sessions resulted in a consensus to develop a common meta framework based on NIST cybersecurity framework and heavily influenced by CPMI IOSCO. So as you can see here on the right, that there are 5 functions within the NIST CSF. You'll see those within the profile. And the functions, categories, and subcategories are largely the same as the NIST CSF. But then we looked at the ISO 27001 control menu and the existing financial services sector specific regulatory references and brought it down to a level of diagnostic statements. And so you'll see that in blue in the middle. And what that does is where, 10 different regulators are saying that a chief information security officer should report regularly to the board, but they're saying it in different ways. We distill those statements and those requirements into one single statement. And then point back to those specific regulatory references. Also, as we were going through this exercise of looking at the different financial sector specific regulatory references and requirements, we saw that there were really 2 additional areas that financial sector regulators were keenly interested in, and that was governance related matters and what we call supply chain dependency management related issues, but you can think of really as your third party risk issues. So we did tease those out into 2 additional functions to really give them the weight that regulators were particularly concerned with. And so you'll see that on the functions. The other thing that's unique about the profile is that it is a self-assessment. And so each diagnostic statement has 8 potential responses. So you'll see if you download the profile, it's for free on our website for financial institutions to use. You'll see it's an Excel-based spreadsheet and that there are potential responses such as yes, it's risk-based or compensating controls so that an institution can assess its own risk management program. An institution can then collect information and maintain documentation and other evidence to support its assessment and response. And then, as I mentioned, pointing back to those regulatory references, we do include those 2 reference libraries to help institutions understand the origins of those concepts reflected in each diagnostic statement. Most of the time, the diagnostic statements are merging regulation and guidance and supervisory documentation and issuances, as well as international standards and common best practices. And so the overall idea here is that the profile is that a financial institution can first, better assess where they are with compliance, and second, communicate that compliance to regulators, to third parties, to the board. And it also provides a flexible way to absorb and integrate future cyber and operational resilience supervisory expectations within an existing organization and taxonomy. The last element on this slide I wanted to point out is across the top here with the tiering. One thing you know about the financial services sector is that it is incredibly diverse. And asset size, which is often used as an indicator for grouping institutions, isn't necessarily sufficient in describing cyber risk. So to address this, the profile includes a methodology for segmenting the financial services industry, which includes 9 questions that aim at determining the impact on the overall market if a financial institution is compromised. So a tier that a financial institution falls into dictates the number of diagnostic statements to which it would respond. So your tier 1 GSIBs would respond to all 278 diagnostic statements. A tier 4 community institution would respond to 138. And this helps institutions of vastly different sizes easily scale their own risk assessment processes. Now, I talked about scalability and flexibility, or extensibility is why we're here today. So we'll go to the next slide and talk about one of the key ways that we've extended the profile. Probably comes to no one's surprise here that regulators have had increased focus on third parties, but in particular cloud. In the United States, you have the FFIEC AIO handbook, which actually includes a fairly lengthy section on cloud services and points to the CSA shared responsibility model as a framework for understanding responsibilities with cloud service providers. Likewise, the New York State Department of Financial Services included cloud services as being covered by requirements related to MFA. Internationally, you have the European Union's Digital and Operational Resilience Act, which has recently been approved. And you also have the European Banking Authority guidelines on monitoring and seeking compliance on security objectives of providers of information and communication technology providers. And so what we're seeing here is really an increased focus on both the cloud service provider as well as the financial institution understanding clearly where their responsibilities end and a CSP's responsibilities begin. So one of the challenges that we heard for some time was that as firms were moving into the cloud, they were facing challenges with getting the right kind of information from the cloud service providers. We began talking with the cloud service providers and they told us, well, firms are asking for a lot of information and it's not always clear why they're asking for it. So it did seem as though the financial institutions and the cloud service providers seemed to be speaking different languages. And so we've learned that the CSPs were speaking really in the language of the CSA cloud control matrix. Financial institutions were often talking in the language of the NIST CSF. And so we realized there was a need for a translation tool. And so we're really, really pleased to come together with the Cloud Security Alliance because we really do believe that we're stronger together. And through this cloud profile, we can have a translation tool. So we did a mapping as a first step, but then we also included responsibilities and additional guidance. And as a result, we've developed a mutually beneficial framework for assessing security responsibilities and cyber risk through consensus of financial institutions. There are about 50 that participated in this exercise, and 4 major CSPs as well, along with the Cloud Security Alliance and the Bank Policy BITS division. We can go on to the next slide. So one of the things here, so we walked through already the slide on the left, which really shows the architecture of the profile. And on the right, you'll see how it's extended for cloud guidance. So we included a mapping to the CSA CCM version 4, as well as a description of the compatibility between those requirements or the gaps that may or may not exist. We also then extended it further to look at contractual responsibilities by service model to provide some level of understanding of baseline responsibilities between the firm and the cloud service provider, depending on if you're moving to the cloud, if it's a SaaS infrastructure or platform as a service implementation. We also looked at the different types of controls at the diagnostic statement level, as well as the implementation phase. And the ultimate idea here is that as a financial institution is moving into the cloud, they can have really a roadmap for success and communicating with the cloud service provider. Next slide, please. This is a screenshot of what it looks like. I mean, everyone just loves a lengthy spreadsheet. And so we've managed to make it even larger with the green cloud guidance extended. But we hope that it is ultimately very, worth the effort and the squeeze of scrolling through a giant spreadsheet. This, again, is for free on our website. So feel free to check it out on your own as well. But you'll see everything in blue is the profile with the as you would normally see it, with the exception of the CCM mapping. And then everything in green is also new, specific to cloud implementation guidance. So you'll see the contractual responsibilities by service model, leveraging really the CSA's shared responsibility model that Daniele talked about earlier. We use that same terminology so that we're, where possible, really converging along common language and taxonomies. What is really unique, I think, about the contractual responsibilities by service model is that there were both firms and major CSPs at the table, really going control objective by control objective, saying, this is where we are responsible and this is where you are responsible. So it really does provide a baseline level of expectation that you can use potentially for developing your contracts as you move to the cloud. The control category as well gives you some level of information about the types of resources that might be used as you move to the cloud for specific controls. So is it a technological control? Do I need more people to be able to implement this control, and so forth? And as well as the phase. So from the very beginning to the very end, there's a roadmap for what controls you should be aware of. Next slide, please. And I'll throw this to Daniele, but really the concept here is that, we, as we're going through this exercise, thought, okay, it is really necessary to understand responsibilities. And one of our sort of informal mantras is, do not reinvent the wheel. And so we're really pleased that around the same time, CSA had developed the shared responsibility model, which really we leveraged for this contractual responsibilities. So just to walk through an example of what the cloud profile is, you'll see here two different controls, one from the profile and one from the CCM, really focused at its core on backing up data to ensure resiliency purposes. And we did a mapping. It's great. That's usually where both of our organizations sort of end on the process. Until we really started looking at, okay, well, does that really give the financial institution all of the information that they need? Who is responsible for it? When does it apply? Does it vary depending on the type of service model? And so we'll go to the next slide to kind of walk through this example of how we answer those questions. So for that control objective of backing up data for cyber resiliency purposes, you'll see, yes, it really does vary depending on the service model. And then we also looked at ISO's 27002 guidance for those different types of control categories and found that this is, both a technological and a people-based control, and that it applies during the run phase of cloud implementation. And so again, the idea here is that as a financial institution is moving into the cloud, you have a more complete picture of what that implementation might look like, what resources might be involved, and support ongoing monitoring and planning. Next slide, please. Just wanted to mention here as well, just to re-emphasize the level of importance that regulators and government institutions are placing on cloud. We did learn that the U.S. Department of the Treasury has been working on a report related to the financial sector's use of cloud. And during a Financial Stability and Oversight Council Principals meeting in October, a Deputy Assistant Secretary, Todd Conklin, referenced that they'd be looking to the Cyber Risk Institute really as a result of some of these cloud profile implementation efforts as a potential starting point for working with oversight of cloud service providers. So just something to keep on the radar that, that there is a lot of focus on cloud, and we're really pleased that as a result of this collaboration, we're having a good starting point moving forward.
All right, thank you very much, Emily. So then, the question is, what's next? And what's next on the CSA side is, as I mentioned in the beginning, the creation of a financial service addendum to the cloud control matrix. And why are we doing here? After what Emily just said, I think it's kind of pretty obvious. We got to a point where financial institutions are increasingly accelerating their transition to cloud. Despite a pretty slow initial uptake, we are now in a situation where most of the financial institutions, not to say all, are not just moving non-critical services to the cloud, but they are looking at more critical services that can be moved to cloud computing. And in such a situation, clearly, they need to address some of the obvious challenges: trust and assurance, governance, visibility and control, risk management, third-party vendor management, and compliance. In order to be able to satisfy those needs and address those challenges, clearly, they need a dedicated framework to support the cloud journey. Now, the work that CSA has done so far with CCM and the collaboration with CRI have provide good input to the financial institution. But during our discussions with financial institutions across the globe, we quickly realized that still there is a bit of a gap between what cloud control matrix is currently covering as opposed to what the financial institution really need in order to have a relaxed, a smooth journey into the cloud. And this is why we started to work on the idea of extending cloud control matrix focusing on financial sector requirements. The way we are doing it is very much done according to the usual modus operandi of CSA. So we have been discussing so far our collaboration with CRI, which certainly the result, so the cloud profile and the result of this collaboration is not the end of a journey, but it's rather the beginning of it, because both the organizations are very cognizant that we are in a very, very dynamic market with technologies that are changing very rapidly. So we need to adapt and we need to improve our best practices in order to address those new challenges. So we have the collaboration with CRI. At the same time, in parallel, we have been doing a collaboration with IBM and doing a mapping with the cloud framework for financial services. But then we were also approached by a couple of very relevant European-based group of financial institutions. One called European Cloud User Coalition, which is a group of over 30 European financial institutions, and then by a group called Collaborative Cloud Audit Group, which is again another informal consortium composed by financial institutions that, based on the recommendation of the European Banking Agency, has started to work on collaborative audits or pool audits. And we realized that both these organizations were using as a foundation for their approach to cloud, the cloud control matrix. So they decided to join forces with us in order to transfer to us specific additional needs that they want us to mount on the top, to layer on the top of the existing cloud control matrix, in order to create an additional set of dedicated controls that can fully satisfy the needs of the financial regulators. Because important to say here that the European Cloud User Coalition is working on a very close relationship with the national regulators of the countries that those banking institutions represent. So they are getting directly from the regulators the expression of what is supposed to be done in order for a financial institution to comply with the national and international regulation. So that's where we stand, working with 4 different institutions in order to create what we believe is going to be an important addition to the cloud control matrix. Now, the idea is that we are going to complete this work, which is ongoing, towards Q3 2023, and then release, as usual, free of charge, the financial service addendum to the cloud control matrix. And then finally, we are going to embed these into our STAR program in order to offer the possibility of a dedicated compliance offer that is going to be addressing the needs of the financial sector and hopefully going to decrease that governance and compliance fatigue that both financial institutions and cloud service provider are currently suffering. And with that, I would like to thank you for taking the time to attending this presentation. And especially, I would like to thank Emily for joining the Cloud Security Alliance in explaining the beauty of the collaboration between CSA and the CRI. Thank you very much, Emily.
Thank you for having me.